Look at this sequence. Like, it's just the blood effect to literally the body. Like, he's reforming. It's so good. Oh my goodness, man. It's I I remember when the first chapter of Undead Unluck came out, and I reviewed this like years ago. Like, I reviewed and did a first impressions on this series the day the first chapter came out, and I was like, I really hope this series goes places, because the very concept of a character basically having a power called Unluck, to where if anyone puts physical human contact, like skin to skin contact with her, they end up dying. It's a very unique concept that plays with, like, just someone that wants to have a bond with someone that wants to be able to have a romantic partner, but obviously can't, thanks to just reality itself saying you cannot. That, like, fate has told you that you will never be able to feel the warmth of someone, because if you do, you will kill them. It's just a very interesting concept being played with Fuko, our main female character of Undead Unluck. Fuko is just such a great character, and I loved the theme of this when I first saw this in the manga, and then accompanying that with Andy, which is literally an undead nightmare. Like, this man literally is a menace, and he's just pretty much a zombie. He cannot die. It's just such a interesting combination of just, like, abilities, because you have someone that literally just wants to be able to hold somebody and be able to just maybe have a romantic relationship or whatever, but just can't, and Andy is an individual that just wants to die because he's lived for so long he cannot die, and so he wants to find a way that he can eventually end it all. And it's a very fascinating concept, because obviously these two technically should never, make or form a relationship, or they would normally never be able to have a relationship, but somehow they can because of just the circumstances of their abilities. I don't know, I've always liked the concept of Undead Unluck, especially when I read, the beginning of the story. Now, let's talk about this first episode. Let's dive in deep. Let's talk about the synopsis, the plot, what it's about, etc. I know I've kind of already given glimpses of what to expect, but let's really dive into this and actually explain why many should watch this. Like, I really, really hope that a lot of people give this a shot, and I know there's going to be reasons why some are going to drop this, and I will talk about that in a moment, but I really, really hope that this series is successful, because it's very clear that David Productions that's working on this show really is giving their all. Like, they're really doing a good job. To the camera angles, the background art, the music, the animation, it's good. It's so good. And I've been really anticipating just, watching this and finally being able to see these characters like Andy and Fuko animated and moving around with voices attached to them. It's such an absolute treat to the eyes. I really just love everything about, like, this show. Like, this show is legitimately incredible, and I love just, like, the music at the end here. It's back to back. Like, it's super, super good. So, let's talk about the reasons why people probably would not like this show, because I know there's a few reasons why, but I guess let's just get right into it, okay? Andy and his overall feely nature on Fuko is definitely going to turn a lot of people off from wanting to watch this series. Like, I 100% see it, because I remember the exact same thing happened when the manga released, and I talked about that in my chapter reviews early on, saying that, Undead Unluck, is going to have a hard time probably keeping people wanting to read it when the manga came out, because Andy was just so feely on Fuko, and it seemed like she didn't really want that. She was completely against it, and it's just like everything about it, people didn't like that whole concept, which makes sense why people wouldn't like that. It just, a lot of people would drop the series because of those elements. But the thing is that only happens for the first, like, 4 or 5 chapters of the manga, maybe up to chapter 6, and then it really never resurfaces or reappears once again, and around chapter 12 to 14, the series just becomes something absolutely outstanding that just blew my mind. Anyone that made it that far blew their mind as well, because of just some of the twists and turns that it actually does. It's a legitimately insane manga series with a very unique premise, very unique power system. It's really freaking cool. And it's sad that a lot of people coming into this story, like watching this anime or reading the manga, are going to drop it instantly, as soon as they see, like, the middle section of this episode. Once again, makes sense why there is some hatred towards that, but I really hope those that, don't like that stuff just stick around a little bit longer, because it's not going to be like that. It'll only be for, like, maybe episode 1 to 3, and that's it, and it'll be done. And then it'll carry on and really become something on its own. I truly cannot recommend people to stick through it, because it will be a really, really good show. I promise you on that. If the animators like David Productions continues to produce quality like they did with this episode, this legitimately will be a banger of a show. Like, it will. But, okay, let's get into the actual premise, okay? So, the start of this episode is very misleading. For anyone that has, like, no idea what Undead Unluck is, when they first watch this episode, they see, like, an abandoned world, like, snow-covered, and you see, like, two people basically looking like they have romantic interest in each other, and then you see, like, a flash to a girl that's just watching something, and then as the episode carries on, you see, like, an explosion of an airplane, and you just see these other characters looking like, they're gonna die or something in the cold, but they obviously love each other. It's a very interesting, like, beginning, and, like, the very tone of the first few minutes of the show is very misleading. Like, you expect it to be a completely different show, but then once all this is said and done, they have this little kiss scene and all that, and you see the plane explode, you see, Fuko appear in the story, and she's like, I'll end myself, and, I'm glad I got to read it to the end. It's a very dark beginning to the story, but in a very trying to do it in a comedic way, but it's very dark with its undertones, and it tackles a very difficult topic. And let's get into that. Fuko as a character, and what led her to this, and why she even said these words at the beginning of the episode. Fuko is someone that basically is responsible for the death of her parents. Thanks to her ability Unluck, to where anyone puts skin-to-skin contact on her, they will inevitably get faced with Unluck and die. It obviously can range depending on, severity. Like, we saw, like, a box of bananas fall on Andy in this episode, to the man getting struck by lightning. It really just depends on how long, but also if Fuko probably puts her wanted contact on them, and also wanting to, let's say, maybe have romantic feelings for them, or at least some form of love towards them, because that's definitely something that is presented throughout this episode, that Fuko really loved her parents. Like, she absolutely loved her parents, and when she kissed them and held them and hugged them before they got on the plane, she was showing her affection and love, and then obviously her parents died. We cut to later on in this episode where she kisses Andy on the cheek while he's in disembodied head, and you see a meteor come down from the sky and land on top of him. It showcases that the severity of her ability kind of ranges from how much she actually cares about you. So, she realizes that she can never really have a relationship, so she sought comfort in romantic manga and light novels. Like, the whole bit of this at the beginning is basically her trying to escape reality and trying to find happiness in something that she cannot obtain herself. It's very sad and emotional just seeing how she has to dive into these stories just to be able to feel that, because she believes she will never have anything like that what's in storybooks. And so she's like, well, if I cause so much misery for people that fall in love with me, I'd rather just remove myself from the equation, which that's what she kind of wants to do within this episode. She doesn't want to technically do it, but she's like, there's no other future for her, because it's like she will never be able to hold someone's hand, kiss them on the cheek, all these different type of things. She will forever be lonely, and that is just extremely crippling. Like, really just take a moment and put yourself in Fuko's shoes for a second, okay? Let's just hypothetically say that at this moment, from this point onward, this very second, you no longer could put any physical contact on anyone, okay? Like, anyone. Not your family, not your friends, nothing. No lovers, anything. Just completely, you no longer can even have skin-to-skin contact. And at first glance, you might think, well, there's ways around this. Use clothing, etc. But eventually, you'll feel like there is distance. There's a barrier between you and that person, especially if you seek longing or want to hug someone. You really can't. And it's just incredibly dangerous. You might as well treat yourself as if you have a disease, because if you touch anyone, you're pretty much signing their death warrant. They're dead. And that would be extremely crippling emotionally, just having to deal with that on a constant every single day, knowing this. And her very attire, the way you see her present herself as a character, she has, just a hat on, she has this, coat on, gloves on, she's just very bundled up. And when you think about the very presentation of the world, it's obviously a very bright day. This isn't necessarily like a very cold day and all that. It's clear it's probably in spring or summer. It's possible it could be in fall, but it's very likely she's in the middle of the summer months, and it implies that, she just really has to live like this. She has to worry about every little interaction she has with someone. One simple walking down the street and accidentally tapping them on the hand, they're dead. You could just imagine the worry, the stress of that. So her character is extremely tragic, and so her meeting someone like Andy that theoretically cannot die is straight up the luckiest she's ever been. But the sad thing about the whole reality is that Andy is an individual that wants to die. So he doesn't want to stick around, but the thing is that, he has to stick around because of the very concept of just how he is undead. So, it's interesting. It's a nice contrast between the two characters, just showcasing how one doesn't really care too much about their own life, while the other one does and cares about others. It's like these two individuals really are polar opposites, or technically they should never have come in contact with each other, but somehow they did, and it presents itself within the story. So yeah, I love Undead Unluck. It's just such a good series when you really just look at the little details that is presented just from the first episode alone. Now, that's not getting into the overarching plot. I mean, we also have at the end where there's these enemies and all that is trying to abduct Andy and Fuko, apparently using her as a weapon, like to, murder and kill others, which makes sense how her ability works, and Andy is trying to get locked up. So we know there's this organization that is aware of people with special abilities, or what they classified them as at the end of this episode as negators. So we got a little bit of information on that in terms of the power system, and yeah, I'm not going to dive too deep into that one because of spoiler reasons, but I will say the power system is really, really freaking cool. So yeah, overall, Undead Unluck is good. It does have, obviously, some ecchi content within it, and once again, I want to make sure I re-say this once again, is that the whole Philly thing with, Andy going towards Fuko, that does tone down and just basically disappear. It does, okay? And it becomes more of, like, an actual relationship between the two characters. I want to clarify that. That's as far as I'm going to go, but if that stuff bugs you, it will disappear. Do not worry. It really is a good show. It's a good manga at the very least. I don't know if the show is going to continue to be good, but the manga is legitimately good. It's one of the best shonen I read on a weekly basis. It's super, super good. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. I wanted to shout out Undead Unluck, because this is definitely one of the series I've been waiting for a very long time, and to finally see it animated makes me super, super happy. But if you enjoyed this video, do leave me a like. It does help me out a lot. I would greatly appreciate it. It does help with the algorithm and more people to discover my content. But be safe, stay healthy, Chibi out.